Let's get this guy out of here. Worms was a game that I didn't really fully understand the first time I played it. You see, I got my PS1 secondhand with a couple of games. Daredevil Derby 3D, Rocket Power, the Pizza Hut demo disc, and Worms World Party. I didn't really grasp the concept of a turn-based strategy video game, probably because I was a dumb child. So anytime I boot up Worms World Party, I would think that I was stuck on a permanent demo screen, but every so often it would end up being my turn, and I would have control of a worm, and I'd start moving around trying to figure out how to play the game, but inevitably my turn would end, and I would go back to thinking I was in a demo mode. It wasn't until years later, when I rediscovered Worms on the Xbox 360, that I truly grasped the concept of the game and fell in love. Now, what is Worms exactly? Well, I'll tell you. Imagine you have an ant farm, but instead of ants, you have worms, and these worms are at war. Like true gentlemen, taking turns, of course. See, now that worm over there, he might be pointing a shotgun at me, and I might want to avoid his shot. But it's not my turn, so I can't do anything. I just gotta sit here and look pretty. The thing I like about Worms is that it's very easy to pick up and play, but there are some elements to the game that can be learned to make you a better player, like the wind, for example, which can move some of your weapons shots in midair depending on which way the wind is blowing, and you can pull off some pretty crazy shots with this, or it can mess up your shots completely. It's something that I feel like I'm never going to fully master, but I played around with it a little bit. But at the same time, there's always an element of randomness, like for example the randomly generated levels, and your worms spawn in random locations on this level, unless of course you decide to play with the option where you get to place your worms on the map, or using one of the pre-generated maps like in Worms Armageddon that honestly look like MS Paint drawings, and I love it. I like this level right here, because I mean, like, just look at him. Look at that dinosaur up there. Looking derpy as fuck. I love them. These levels are also filled with a bunch of random assortments of mines and barrels, which can be used to your advantage or disadvantage. Like, for example, maybe I'll blow up an explosive barrel to cause more damage to a worm, or maybe I'll push a worm into a mine, have the mine blow up, or maybe I'll trigger a mine on purpose, run away, have it blow up, damaging a worm, but then I'll still have room left in my turn to use a weapon. The thing I like about the mines is that they're a little bit random, where in most of the games you get a couple seconds to trigger it and run away, so you could trigger it and then, like, you know, still do other things in your turn. But in some of the games they have different fuse settings where you might step over it and it might instantly blow up, and that would just completely backfire on you. But in all the games there's also the possibility where the mine could just be a complete dud and doesn't do anything. In every Worms games you get to customize everything from the team name itself to the individual worms names, so you can get attached and get real sad when they die, when they do their little explosive death animations, whether it's TNT, swallowing a grenade, or even this. And then you also get to customize the tombstone that they drop when they die, the team flag, the way they look, their voice bank. There's a lot of good voices you can choose from in the game. I always like the classic English version, but there's also plenty of other options you could pick from, like aliens, robots, gangsters, rappers, but I think by far my personal favorite is the Soul Man.
Wow! Can I get a ooh?
All the Worms levels are surrounded by water, which is an insta-kill since worms can't swim, and it's really fun trying to figure out how to knock enemy worms into the water to get that insta-kill from them. But I think by far the best part about the water is that once the round timer ends, it kicks into sudden death, and the water just starts rising, and it kind of changes the way the game plays a little bit, where you're like trying to seek higher ground to avoid getting swept up away by the water, but you're also trying to still attack the enemy worms to, you know, kill them. But sometimes it leads to these really interesting scenarios where you're on one island and the enemy's on another island, and you kind of just have to start taking shots at each other from across the map, kind of like these sniper shots, trying to take each other out while also, you know, still avoiding the water that's constantly rising. But that's enough about water. Let's move on and talk about the meat and potatoes of the Worms games, which are the weapons and utilities. And first we're going to start off with the gold standard universal weapons and utilities you can expect to find in every Worms game out there, except the Space Oddity ones out there. And for starters, we have the bazooka and the grenades, and they both cause about the same amount of damage, but I like the grenades a little bit more because you can just drop them and just slither away like the little rascal you are. But if you want the same effect but more explosive, we have the dynamite, which is really great for causing mass damage to multiple worms at once. But if you want to get even crazier than that, there's a grenade that's so explosive it's going to have the worm seeing God himself. Hallelujah. But hey, maybe explosives aren't your thing. We also have guns like the pistol, the Uzi, and the shotgun. And the pistol and the Uzi are great for, just general, damage to one worm. But the shotgun is great because if you get off the first shot without damaging yourself in any way, shape, or form, you're granted a second shot. And with this, you can do so many things. You can shoot an explosive barrel and then a worm. You can finish off 2 worms in the same turn. Just so many options. But hey, maybe you want to get in there, hand-to-hand style, maybe a little Ryu action, some Street Fighter, and you want to hit them with a little fire punch or a dragon punch, which are not only great for damaging enemy worms, but it's also great for pushing them either off the map into the water or towards a mine. But maybe you want to get a little less fancy with it. You want to give them a little push. You don't want to hurt them too bad. Just a little push of encouragement. Maybe, a prod, if you will. Prodding them off the map into the water, or just prodding them off the edge of something. But maybe you want to send them off the map with the baseball bat like this. Oh, I'm going. Moving back to explosives, we have the homing missile, which is like the bazooka, but it's homing, in case you need me to piece that together for you. It's very straight cut once it starts homing on, so you want to make sure there's nothing in between your missile and your target once it starts homing on. You can really get some awesome cross-map shots with this weapon, a little Hail Mary, if you will. Let me get an ooh.
Ooh!
But an easier way to get a cross-map kill is with the airstrike, which you can call from anywhere on the map, just like this. Hold on.
Hello.
Can you drop the airstrike over there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right there.
Incoming.
That's good. That's what I'm talking about. Then we have the sheep, who's this drone-like weapon, which you can just send off towards the enemies and just watch as that sheep runs over there and you get ready to trigger that explosion once he gets close. But then there's also the super sheep, which flies around the map with these weird-ass inverted controls, and you can just get worms from across the map with them. No worm shall escape my wrath. Well, unless they're underground, which if that's the case, you could use a bunker buster airstrike, which drills its way down to them and explodes. But if you don't want to do that, you could also just move down to them by making tunnels with the blowtorch and drill utility. That's right, babies and gentlemen, we're moving on to utilities. A lot of the utilities are used to help you move around the map. Like the blowtorch and drill, for starters, are just a good way of just drilling through the map, making these little tunnels, and they do damage to the worms as well. Not a whole lot, but it's enough to get your point across. You know what you did. The jetpack is the easiest way to get around the map, but it does come at the cost of fuel. The rope is another great way of getting around the map, and it really makes you feel like Spider-Man pulling off all these like ninja ass moves you could do with it. And a lot of the games have like this stiffness to the rope that I really like, that like you can kind of like manipulate to do these gravity defying moves. Both the rope and the jetpack have this ability where you can equip a weapon while you're using it, namely like grenades. And what you can do is you can like drop a grenade and then like fly off with a jetpack, or like, get away with the rope and just like escape the scene like the little goblin you are. You can also equip a parachute too, which is great for when you're using the jetpack and you run out of fuel to have a backup option, but it's also a great way of traversing the map if the wind's in your favor. Then we have the teleporter, which will teleport you anywhere on the map, but it does end your turn once you use it. Then there's the girder, which you could use to make platforms or even bunker up. Oh shoot, we're bunkering up? We better set up a sentry gun to defend ourselves and a magnet to repel missiles and grenades coming our way. Oh, maybe we could even use the magnet to attract missiles and grenades but place it near an enemy worm. Just make sure we have the right setting on so we're not attracting missiles, grenades, and bad juju our way when we're not asking for it. The last couple of utilities you can expect to see in every Worms game is the Worm Select, which, I don't know, is an option to pick whatever worm you want that turn. It's honestly a really cool utility, and if you have enough of them, you could really move your whole team around in the same turn, and it's really cool. The last two utilities are the Skip and Go and the Surrender for the indecisive and loser players. That's right, I'm calling you out if you use these. You know who you are. I record hours upon hours of footage for this video, and not once did I use a skip and go or a surrender. Never back down, never give up. Nut up or shut up, buddy. Let me get a new.
Ooh!
Now let's get into some other fun weapons that you don't see in every Worms games. We'll start with some of the ones you see in most of the Worms games, and then we'll get a little bit more weird and wild and maybe obscure with it. Who knows? We're having fun. Let me get another ooh.
Ooh!
Starting off first, we have the old lady who you kind of just send off like the sheep, but instead of pressing a button to make her explode, what she does is she farts on the worms, which poisons them, causing damage over time. Damn, what you eatin', granny? The banana bomb is a more bouncy, explosive version of the cluster bomb. I don't really understand why it's so bouncy, but I love using it nonetheless. My personal favorite airstrike is the carpet bomb, which is a play on words because you literally drop these explosive carpets that for some reason when they hit the ground they bounce and explode, and you repeat this process for a couple times. And I really love this weapon just because of how ridiculous it is. And then in Worms WMD specifically, I love it because there's like a custom aircraft for it that's a flying van that drops the carpets. It's really cool. The concrete donkey is one of my favorite weapons in the Worms games because of how ridiculous and overpowered it is. I mean, like, it literally does this. Oh, I'm going. I swear, if you play a game where everybody gets one concrete donkey, or God forbid, unlimited of them, the whole map is going to be a giant crater. But this next weapon is more catastrophic to the whole map, and if everybody gets them, the whole game is going to be over in like seconds. And that weapon is the Armageddon, which literally brings like the end of days to the map. It brings this meteor strike that like destroys the whole map, and if you call one in, you better make sure your worms are safe before you call it in, because it will just destroy the whole map, turning it into a piece of Swiss cheese. Moving on to some less catastrophic weapons, we have Buffalo Eyes, and I'd be lying to you if I told you this weapon wasn't fun. But anyway, so it runs towards enemies and it headbutts them, causing explosions. And not just one explosion, multiple explosions. It keeps running. He's on a mission. He's going somewhere. I don't know where he's going, but I'm gonna find out. Bovine Blitz is an airstrike that doesn't function like the normal airstrikes. You just send a plane over the map and you press a button to individually drop cows that will parachute down onto the map, and you can just drop them all in one place. You can spread them out throughout the map. It's honestly a great way of like causing damage in multiple different spots on the map. And I'm just imagining these cows are just up in this plane, just like, where are we dropping, boys? Saddle up, this is it. Boggy Bee is another unique airstrike like Bovine Blitz, but like in another way. It's almost like a helicopter strike because you take control of a worm who's hanging on the side of the screen and you throw a grenade wherever you want on the map, and it explodes on impact. Oh, I'm sorry, were you hiding in a cave? Now I want to talk about the water weapons. Water is always a mechanic that I love in all the Worms games because of the insta-kill factor, but some of the games have this gelatin-looking water that comes out of some of the weapons, and you can push worms around the map with this. You could drown them, create like these little pools of water for you to drown multiple worms at once, unless of course they have a scuba mask so they can breathe underwater, or they use a drain plug to drain the water. Here, let me give you a little splash with this water balloon. There's a couple different water weapons. There's the water balloons for starters, which I just mentioned. There's the water gun, which is like unleashing a hose on some rascal kids. Then there's also the water strike, which is an airstrike that drops water balloons. And then lastly, my favorite, the water jetpack, which is a jetpack, but at the same time while you're flying around, you can splash an MF. Since we're talking about the water weapons, we might as well talk about the Worms games with the water weapons in them, which I'm going to call the class-based Worms games. In these games, when you're customizing your team, not only do you get to name your individual worms and give them a cute little hat, but you can also assign them a class. There are 4 classes total. The soldier, which is the standard worm that we've come to know and love. The scout, who is tiny, he can jump higher, he can move faster, he gets more juice out of jetpacks and blowtorches, but he takes more damage. The heavy is the complete opposite because he moves slower, he doesn't jump very high, he gets less juice from jetpacks and blowtorches, but he causes more damage, and when he dies, he has a nuke-like finish. Oh, I'm going. Lastly, we have the scientist, who functions a little bit similarly to the soldier, but he does less damage, and at the beginning of every one of his turns, he heals all the worms on your team. And, you know, he's also got a big-ass head. Look at that head. What thoughts you got going on up there? What you thinking about? What ideas you got? What you stewing upon? Of all these classes, the scout is my personal favorite. Sure, they take more damage, but dang, can they move around that map, unlike the heavy over here. But the heavy is still useful in his own right, you just gotta hope that you don't have to like move around the map a whole lot with him, because if you have to climb up anything, the jetpacks and the ropes aren't gonna do you any good. He's just very accident prone, but at least when he dies, it's kind of like a nuke, so you can cause more mass damage by killing one. While we're talking about different types of Worms games, there's also the 3D Worms games, which whenever I think about them, I don't think about them too fondly, mostly because I feel like it's harder to get water kills in those games, which is my favorite way of killing worms. But once I start playing them, namely Ultimate Mayhem, I realize how wrong I am because they're so much fun. Ultimate Mayhem has this weird retro 3D design to all the maps, if that makes any sense to you, and I absolutely love all the maps in this game. There's a lot of pre-built ones, but also the randomly generated ones are really cool as well. There's like a lot of castles and stuff like that, and like prehistoric stuff, like these dinosaurs over here. Look at that dinosaur, he's beautiful. The 3D games definitely suffer from some awkwardness, specifically for like the airstrikes and setting up homing missile shots, because you got to use this blimp view that's like kind of like, it feels a little bit weird to use, but once you get the hang of it, it's fine. But the first person aiming is really good, and I really like that when you aim at worms, they put their hands up like, oh, don't shoot me. The last Worms game I want to talk about specifically is WMD. Now, WMD isn't doing anything crazy or different like the class-based Worms games or the 3D Worms games, but instead it's doubling down on what makes the 2D classics like Armageddon so good by adding more wacky and fun shenanigans. For starters, we have vehicles like the tank, the helicopter, the drill boat, and even the Rocket League car. That's right, we got references to other video games in this video game. Saddle up, because Rocket League is only just the beginning. The tank is not only good for defending whatever worm is inside the tank, but also you could shoot the tank in these short little burst shots, and also the tank has like kind of like gravity, almost gravity defying moves that look ridiculous when you just hanging off the ledges, and I also absolutely love how stupid and silly the jump for the tank looks. The helicopter is the absolute best way of traveling around the map. It also has a gun on it, which you can use as like machine gun to shoot worms, but I personally just use it to move around the map. The drill boat is an awesome utility vehicle because you can just dig these giant tunnels with it, but also at the same time it's a boat, so it floats on water, and then if you use this during sudden death, it makes you feel really powerful because it will just rise up with the water. Just make sure that you're not in a place where you'll get clipped on an edge of a surface, because the boat will capsize. Worms WMD also introduces buildings into the 2D Worms games, which the buildings themselves, you can't really see into them, but once you crawl inside of them, you can see everything inside of them. It's honestly a cute little mechanic. Now let's get into a few of the weapons that Worms WMD has, and we're not going to talk about every weapon in the game because there's a sheer ton of weapons in this game, but we're going to talk about the ones I want to talk about because it's my video, goddammit. For starters, we have the dodgy foam battery, or the doggy foam battery if you're fucking stupid like me. Admittedly, I called that the doggy foam battery for too long of a time, not realizing that that was absolutely not the name. But anywhoomst, it is a foam battery that you throw, and it creates an electrical current that travels from worm to vehicle to turret, back to worm, and it basically just creates an electrical current that will shock both worms and vehicles, damaging them. Then we have the W1 rocket, which is a submarine missile that comes out of the water, it shoots the missile, and it takes a really, really long time for the missile to come back down. But if you use it to target a vehicle, once it hits that vehicle, it makes a bunch of like blue fire that does extra damage to vehicles and turrets. The OMG strike is an interesting weapon strike that's not necessarily an airstrike per se. It's more like a satellite strike because a satellite comes down and it shows the worms what it feels like to feel the sun, as it emits a radiation strike that destroys the map in a very interesting way. One thing I really do like about this weapon is after you use it, it creates a bunch of slopes that if you push a worm down it, they slide all the way down to the bottom of the map and fall right in the water. And you know I love them water kills. The rest of the weapons I want to talk about are craftable versions of already existing weapons. That's right, we got crafting in this game, baby! To start, we have the Joanna Dark Strike, which is craftable from the same category as the OMG Strike, and basically what it does is it has Joanna Dark from Perfect Dark come on down from a helicopter and just start blasting some worms. Then we have the Liberty Strike, which is possibly the best carpet bomb in the game, as you drop these explosive, bouncy American missiles. The Henchman is craftable from the Old Lady category, and basically what it does is lets you get this scepter, which you can use to summon a bunch of goblins to go full goblin mode on some worms. The Mining Vase is crafted from the same category as the Dynamite, and it's kind of like a dynamite meets the cluster bomb, and it's really good for, just blowing up big areas, kind of like mining them out. Honestly, a lot of the craftable weapons are just more powerful versions of the already existing weapons, or just adds a little something something on the end of those weapons, like poison damage or fire damage, kind of like the stinky carpet bomb, which adds poison to the carpets, or the flaming baseball bat, which adds fire to the baseball bat. Worms WMD is probably the peak of all the Worms games, but honestly, I love them all. Maybe not so much the first one because it's weird and cursed, since they were going for more of realistic earthworms rather than the cartoony ones that we landed on. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching my video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what you love about the Worms games in the comment section down below. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you mind?